The picture frame cracked behind my back when he shoved me into the wall. Glass scattered across the hallway floor in these tiny, glittering pieces. My shoulder hit first, then my head. The pain shot down my spine, but that's not what made me stop breathing. It was what he just said. 5 words that everyone in that house had been thinking for years but never said out loud. Her future matters. Yours never did. My dad didn't whisper it. He announced it like he was reading the weather forecast. Loud enough that my mom heard it from the kitchen. Loud enough that Amber, my younger sister, looked up from her phone with this satisfied little smirk. I was 22 years old, standing in the hallway of my childhood home with a job interview scheduled in less than 2 hours. And my father had just told me, in front of everyone, that I never mattered. Here's the thing though, I already knew that. I'd known it since I was 8 years old. Let me back up. I'm Amelia Sullivan, and I learned early that silence was easier for everyone. It kept the house steady. It kept the peace from cracking. It kept me in the place they expected, quiet, useful, invisible. When I was 8, Amber threw a tantrum over a toy she wanted. Not just any toy, it was mine. Something I'd saved 3 months of birthday money for. This little art set with oil pastels and sketch pads that I kept on my shelf like it was made of gold. She screamed until her voice went hoarse. Just stood in my doorway and shrieked because I wouldn't hand it over. Dad walked in, took one look at her red, tear-streaked face, then turned to me. Give it to her. You're the older one. Act like it. He didn't ask what was fair. He didn't even ask if it was mine. He just held out his hand and waited. I remember placing that art set into his palm, my fingers slipping away slowly, like I was learning how to let go of ownership without making a sound. Amber grabbed it and skipped away, already forgetting why she'd wanted it in the first place. No one looked back. No one said thank you. No one even acknowledged what had just happened. That art set sat in her room for maybe a week before she got bored of it. I'd see it sometimes, shoved under her bed or buried in her closet, the pastels broken and scattered. But I never asked for it back. By then, I understood the rule: what was mine could be taken, but what was hers was untouchable. And that became the pattern. By middle school, it wasn't even spoken anymore. It was just understood. I'd bring home straight A's and set the report card on the kitchen counter, waiting for someone to notice. Amber would burst through the door minutes later, waving flyers for her dance recital or some school play she'd landed a part in. Mom would squeal. Dad would clap. The flyers got taped to the fridge with these big colorful magnets. My report card would slide under a stack of grocery coupons and stay there for weeks. One afternoon, I found it bent at the corner with a coffee ring stained across my name. I didn't say anything. I just smoothed the paper flat and tucked it into a folder in my room. Holding it felt like proof that something I did mattered, even if it was only to me. I kept that folder for years. Every report card, every certificate, every tiny piece of evidence that I existed and accomplished things. Sometimes I'd open it late at night and just look through it, reminding myself that I wasn't invisible everywhere, just at home. High school made everything worse. I picked up a part-time job at this diner on the edge of town, saving tips in a jar under my bed. It wasn't much, crumpled bills, coins that smelled like metal and grease, but it was mine. I was planning to use it for college applications, the ones no one else encouraged me to fill out. I'd count it sometimes. Not because I needed to know the exact amount, but because holding that jar made me feel like I had control over something. Like I was building toward a future that belonged to me. Then one Saturday morning, I came home to find the jar empty. Mom stood at the kitchen sink washing dishes like nothing had changed. When I asked her about it, she didn't even look at me. Your sister needs new shoes for her competition. You'll manage. You always do. My throat tightened, but I nodded. Arguing never worked. It only made me the villain in my own house. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask why Amber's competition shoes mattered more than my entire future. But I already knew the answer. Her dreams were investments. Mine were hobbies. See, Dad had this way of making Amber's ambitions sound like destiny and mine sound like an inconvenience. If she wanted a ride to practice, I drove. If she wanted spending money, I figured it out. If she failed at something, someone else was blamed. If I slipped even once, all the disappointment landed on me. I learned to anticipate needs before they were spoken. To apologize for things I didn't do. To disappear before I irritated anyone. Responsibility became second nature, not because I was mature, but because they insisted I carry everything she dropped. There were nights I'd sit in the hallway listening to muffled laughter from the living room. They'd be watching a movie or celebrating something Amber accomplished or planning her next audition. I'd hover by the stairs, waiting for an invitation that never came. Sometimes Dad would glance my way, then pull the door halfway closed, blocking me from sight. I'd stand there a moment longer, until the sound of their joy felt like static in my chest, then turn away. One night, I heard them talking about a family vacation, some beach trip they were planning. They discussed flights and hotels and restaurant reservations. I packed a bag quietly in my room, excited despite myself. The morning they left, I woke up to an empty house. There was a note on the counter, "Watch the house. We'll be back Thursday." They hadn't forgotten to invite me. They just never planned to. The worst part wasn't the favoritism. It was how normal it became. How every slight, every dismissal, every expectation that I'd just handle it, all of it softened into routine. Background noise. I stopped asking to be seen. I stopped expecting fairness. I stopped believing there was space for me at any table, family or otherwise. Looking back, there wasn't one moment that broke me. It was the slow carving away of worth, year after year, until I learned the one lesson they needed me to understand. I wasn't meant to take up space in that house. And for a long time, I didn't. The morning of the interview felt different. I woke up before the sun, steamed my blazer, laid the folder on my bed, and rehearsed answers under my breath. For once, the silence in the house wasn't heavy. It felt like the day might actually bend in my direction. I'd applied for this position months ago, a junior analyst role at a tech company downtown. When they called to schedule the interview, I'd sat in my car for 20 minutes afterward, just breathing, letting the reality sink in. This was real. This was mine. Then Amber appeared at my door. She was sipping an iced coffee, sunglasses still on even though we were indoors, looking like she just rolled out of bed and expected the world to adjust. "I need you to take me to the mall by noon," she said. Not asked. Said. Like she was ordering a ride service. "I can't," I answered, zipping up my portfolio. "My interview is at 12:30. She blinked slowly, confused, not by my words, but by the fact that I thought they mattered. "Take me first. Just call them and move it." I stared at her. Really looked at her for the first time in months. "I'm not canceling my job interview just to drive you to the mall." The sentence hung in the space between us. Unfamiliar. Like speaking a language this house didn't recognize. Her face tightened. She didn't argue. She just turned and called out, "Dad." He arrived less than 2 minutes later. Footsteps heavy. Jaw set like he'd been waiting years for a reason to explode. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't listen to my side. He just pointed at me. "What's this I'm hearing? You're refusing to take your sister where she needs to go?" "I have an interview," I said quietly. "It's important." He laughed. Cruel, loud, the kind that fills a room and empties it at the same time. "Important? You think some entry-level job matters more than your sister's plans?" "It matters to me," I said. That's when his face changed. Like I'd crossed some invisible line by suggesting my life had value. And then he said it. "Her future matters. Yours never did." The words hit before his hands did. He shoved me so hard my back slammed into the hallway wall. The picture frame behind me cracked. Glass skittered across the floor in sharp, glittering pieces. My shoulder throbbed. Pain radiated down my spine. Amber watched from the kitchen counter, chewing gum like she was passing time. Like this was entertainment. Mom walked in, saw me on the ground, and sighed. Actually sighed. Like I'd spoiled her morning. "Why do you always start something?" she said. No one helped me stand. No one asked if I was hurt. Dad just stepped closer, blocking the doorway, waiting for me to fold like I always did. But something in me shifted, quiet and final. I picked up my keys, brushed glass from my sleeve, and walked toward the door. Dad moved to block me again. This time, I didn't stop. This time, I walked right past him. The air outside was cold enough to sting, but it was the first breath that didn't feel borrowed. I walked down the driveway, the cracks in the concrete blurring under my feet. Dad's shouting faded behind the door he couldn't reach me through anymore. I didn't look back. I kept walking until the house was out of sight and the shaking in my hands wasn't fear anymore. It was the shock of choosing myself for the first time in my life. Blake pulled up exactly when she said she would. My best friend from college. Silver SUV, engine humming low, window rolling down to reveal the same expression she wore the night I first cried in our dorm, steady, alert, already planning. What did they do? She asked as I slid into the seat. I buckled in, voice shaking. They tried to stop me from going. He shoved me. He said, I paused, swallowing the echo of the words. He said my future never mattered. She didn't gasp. She didn't ask why. She just gripped the steering wheel tighter. Then we're going to make sure they can't touch your future again. The drive downtown felt unreal. My blazer was wrinkled from his hands. There was a faint scratch across my shoulder. My chest still ached where the air had left it. But Blake kept her voice calm, going over practice questions, adjusting my collar, handing me water like we were doing something ordinary instead of rebuilding the entire trajectory of my life. Remember, she said at a red light, you earned this interview. Not them. You. Everything you've done to get here, that's yours. The lobby of the tech company smelled like polished stone and cold air. Fluorescent lights reflected off glass walls, making everything look sharper, cleaner, like a place where people were allowed to start over. I sat through the interview with a stillness I didn't recognize. 47 minutes. 3 interviewers. I answered every question like I'd been preparing for years. Which, in a way, I had. Every night I'd spent invisible, every achievement ignored, every time I'd proven my worth to no one but myself, it all came together in that room. When they asked why I wanted the position, I didn't give them some rehearsed answer about passion and growth. I told them the truth. I want to build something that's mine. Something no one can take away or diminish or pretend doesn't exist. They wrote that down. When I stepped back outside, Blake smiled. Told you. But my phone ruined the moment, buzzing relentlessly with notifications. Messages from Amber. One after another. You ruined everything. Dad's furious. You better come home now. If I miss this meetup because of you, don't bother showing your face again. Hope that stupid interview spits you out. I typed one line back. I'm not coming home. We drove to Blake's apartment, a small, warm space overlooking a quiet street. She handed me a spare towel, a clean t-shirt, and told me to breathe. In the bathroom mirror, I saw the bruise rising on my shoulder. Blooming dark purple, like someone else's fingerprint permanently pressed into my skin. For a moment, I felt 8 again. 12 again. 16 again. Waiting for someone in that house to care. But they never had. And this time, I wasn't waiting. Later that night, Blake entered the living room with her laptop open. Face pale, not frightened, but furious. You need to see this, she said. She turned the screen toward me. An internal HR chat. A forwarded recruiter memo. A voicemail transcription. It took me a second to understand it was about me. Then the words snapped into place. Her father called. Reported her as unstable. Said she attacked him. Warned us she's dangerous to hire. My ribs went numb. Dad hadn't just tried to control me. He tried to erase me before I even got a chance to begin. He called them again tonight, Blake said quietly. Left another voicemail. They forwarded it because he referenced his job title and the board he sits on. That's a policy violation. Several, actually. She tapped the folder she'd already printed. Recruiter notes. Voicemail recordings. Amber's texts. Timeline of interference. He crossed lines he legally can't cross, she said. And we're going to use exactly that. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. The emotion was colder than either. It settled low in my stomach, heavy and precise. What do we do? I asked. Blake opened a blank document, clean, clinical, the type where no one could accuse you of exaggeration. First, she said, we file with corporate compliance at the tech company. Everything neatly attached. Everything factual. Then we send a formal note to the firm your dad works with. They can't ignore it. I nodded. We began. Typed. Saved. Attached. Documented. Filed. Indexed. Forwarded. No emotion. Just the steady sound of keys. The quiet click of the mouse. The hum of the heater under the window. While we worked, Dad called my phone 6 times. Each voicemail angrier, less coherent, more threatening. I didn't listen to them. Blake saved every one. At midnight, the final email was ready. Subject line, formal complaint, external interference with hiring process. Attachments, 8 files. CC'd, HR compliance, legal, the oversight committee of Dad's firm. Blake hovered her finger above the trackpad. You ready? I thought of the wall. The crack in the frame. The bruise on my shoulder. The years of silence. The sentence he delivered like a verdict. Her future matters. Yours never did. Yes, I said. Send it. She clicked. The email left the outbox, and something in me eased. Not joy. Not triumph. Just a slow exhale I'd been holding for years. This time, I said quietly, I'm not fixing what they break. Blake nodded. Good. Because this time, they're the ones who won't recover from it. The first response came sooner than either of us expected. 24 hours after Blake hit send, an email arrived from the tech company's compliance team. Subject line, under review. They requested a call. Not with me, with their internal board. Blake read the message twice, then looked up. They're taking this seriously. They have to. For the next several days, everything moved in the slow, quiet avalanche. Small at first, then impossible to stop. A second email landed in my inbox, this time from HR. They apologized. Not the polished, templated kind. This one had weight. It referenced concerning interference, ethical breaches, and a need to ensure candidate safety. Someone from HR added a line in bold, no further calls from non-applicants will be accepted. It was the first boundary anyone had ever drawn on my behalf. 2 days later, the tech company reached out to my dad's firm. Not privately. Not politely. They sent a compliance inquiry requesting clarification about why a senior advisor from their team had contacted another corporation's HR line multiple times, misrepresenting a candidate and referencing his board position while doing so. Corporate language is its own kind of violence, quiet, undeniable, leaving no space to wriggle out. The inquiry triggered another. And another. By the end of the week, Dad's firm had opened its own review. Not optional. Mandatory. Blake showed me the notice when it leaked internally. A short message forwarded between employees. External complaints received. Advisory privileges temporarily suspended. Pending investigation. Suspended. One word. But it hit harder than anything he'd ever thrown me into. I didn't call home. I didn't need to. The silence from the house stretched across days, tightening like a rope. Then Mom broke it. She called in the afternoon, voice sharp around the edges, the way it always got when something slipped beyond her control. Your father is in trouble, she said. No greeting. No question if I was okay. Someone reported him. They're saying he violated policies. We need you to fix this. Tell them you exaggerated or misunderstood or something. I stared at the phone screen while she talked. The laundry machine hummed in the background at Blake's place. The sun hit the floor in this quiet, warm line. The world around me didn't match her urgency at all. I'm not fixing anything, I said. Mom inhaled sharply. Amelia, listen. No, I said. You listen. I didn't do this to him. He did this to himself. She tried crying next. It sounded tired, rehearsed, like an old script worn thin. How can you do this to us? After everything we've done for you? Everything they'd done for me. The phrase hung there, absurd and hollow. What exactly did you do for me? I asked. My voice was calm. That shocked her more than anger would have. She stammered. We raised you. We gave you a home. You gave Amber a home, I said. I just lived there. I ended the call. The next week brought the blow they never expected. A letter arrived at the house, short, formal, impersonal. I didn't see it, but Blake later received a photo from a mutual acquaintance inside the firm. The letterhead alone told the story. Effective immediately. Contract terminated. Breach of ethical standards. Removal from external advisory committee. This was everything they'd held over me. Connections. Influence. The network they'd flaunted to justify every act of cruelty. Gone. With a single investigation. Dad's nameplate was taken off his office door by noon. Someone saw it happen and whispered. Someone else reported seeing him leave the building early, shoulders tight, face red, humiliation leaking from him like heat. Mom called again that night. This time her voice wasn't sharp. It was small. We don't know what to do, she said. It wasn't supposed to go this far. You have to help us. Please. In the past, her panic would have cracked me open. But now it barely reached me. I'm not the one who pushed this that far, I said softly. And I'm not the one who's going to pull him out. There was a long silence. A silence she couldn't fill, couldn't twist, couldn't weaponize. Amelia, please, she whispered. No, I said. Not anymore. I hung up. Later that evening, HR from the tech company scheduled a private meeting. The room was small, lined with glass and soft lighting. They apologized again, this time in person. They offered me the job, full salary, benefits, a relocation package, and a written guarantee that any future interference from outside parties would be treated as harassment. It wasn't the apology that mattered. It was the acknowledgement that my future did matter. Always had. When I stepped out of the building, the city air felt different. Wide, cold, clean. My phone buzzed again. A voicemail from Dad. The tone was unfamiliar, strained, frantic, stripped of the confidence he'd worn all his life. I deleted it without listening. Walking down the street, I realized something simple. Something undeniable. I didn't take anything from them. They were the ones who handed it all away. The first morning in my new apartment felt unreal. No raised voices. No footsteps pacing the hallway. No tension coiled in the walls like electricity waiting to strike. Just quiet. Light came in through the thin curtains, soft and pale. Nothing like the harsh bulbs at home. I stood barefoot on the cool floor, holding a mug Blake had lent me. The steam rose in slow spirals. The air settled around me with a softness I didn't recognize. For the first time, silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like space. My space. I traced the faint bruise on my shoulder, now only a shadow of itself. It didn't sting anymore. It didn't burn. It simply existed. Evidence of a moment that used to define me, now fading into something I could finally walk past. A reminder, not a wound. The city outside was alive. Cars humming below. Someone shouting good morning across the street. A dog barking into the open air. None of it had anything to do with me, and that was the comfort. I wasn't the center of anyone's anger here. I wasn't the problem to fix. I wasn't the scapegoat or the forgotten one. I was just a person. A person starting over. I opened my laptop to an inbox filled with onboarding documents. Schedules for training. Welcome messages from people who didn't know me beyond what I'd earned. They didn't know my family. They didn't know the walls I'd been thrown into or the years I'd spent invisible. They only knew the work I'd done, the interview I'd passed, the skills I carried. It was strange, seeing a future built on my merits alone. Stranger still, realizing how heavy the past had been only once I stepped out from under it. My phone buzzed once on the counter. A text from Mom. "We need to talk." Then another. "Please." I let the screen dim on its own. I didn't owe them an answer. Silence was no longer submission. Now it was a boundary. I took another sip of coffee, watching the morning light brighten the small room. The city felt wide open in a way I'd never known. Like every street, every sound, every breath belonged to a life that finally had room for me. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for the next storm. I wasn't preparing for impact. I wasn't bracing myself. I was free. Walking away was the only thing I ever took from them. Every consequence that followed was one they created themselves. Freedom didn't come from winning. It came from refusing to stay where I was never meant to grow. Some doors don't close behind you. They disappear the moment you stop knocking. Thanks for listening, and if you liked this story, share it with others, and don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about families, second chances, and finding the courage to choose yourself. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who never made room for you in the first place.